Beavers have been released back into the wild in Essex for the first time in 400 years.
On the evening of May 28, 2009, in a quiet forest in mid-Argyll on Scotland's west coast, a wooden crate was opened at the edge of a still, dark loch, and a Eurasian beaver stepped out into the water for the first time in Scottish history in roughly 400 years. Over the following 24 hours, 10 more beavers followed, 3 family groups in total, released into 3 separate freshwater lochs within Knapdale Forest. It was the first legally sanctioned reintroduction of any mammal species anywhere in the United Kingdom, and within days, an estimated 10 million people had read, heard, or seen news coverage of the event. Few of those millions of viewers could have predicted just how much these 11 animals were about to change the landscape around them. To understand why this moment mattered so much, you have to go back to the 15th and 16th centuries when Eurasian beavers vanished from Scotland entirely. Like most of Europe, Scotland had once supported healthy beaver populations along its rivers and lochs. Hunters targeted them relentlessly for 3 separate resources: thick, waterproof pelts prized in the fur trade, meat that was, under a peculiar medieval church ruling, sometimes classified as fish rather than mammal flesh, and therefore permitted during religious fasting periods, and castoreum, a scent gland secretion used in perfumes and medicines. That combination of pressures proved fatal. By some point in the 15th or 16th century, the last wild beaver in Scotland was killed, and the species disappeared from the country's rivers for the next several hundred years. Beavers are what ecologists call ecosystem engineers, a species capable of reshaping the physical structure of its environment far beyond what its own body size would suggest. Where a healthy population of beavers is present, a single narrow stream can transform, over a period of years, into a complex mosaic of ponds, wetlands, and slow-moving channels, created and continuously maintained by dams built from felled branches, packed mud, and stone. That transformation supports a dramatically wider range of other species than a simple, undammed stream ever could. Everything from dragonflies and amphibians to fish and otters, all of which benefit from the deeper pools, the increased structural complexity, and the wetland vegetation beaver activity creates. For 400 years, Scotland's rivers had been missing this particular engineer entirely. The Norwegian origin of the Knapdale beavers is worth dwelling on for a moment because it reflects a broader truth about the Eurasian beaver's history across the continent. Unlike some reintroduction projects that struggle to find any viable source population at all, European beavers had already rebounded substantially in parts of Scandinavia and Central Europe by the early 2000s, following earlier 20th century conservation efforts there. That recovery elsewhere in Europe is precisely what made a UK reintroduction logistically possible in the first place. Without a healthy donor population in Norway, there would have been no genetically robust, disease-screened beavers available to release into Knapdale at all, a reminder that species recoveries in one country can often depend directly on prior recoveries somewhere else entirely. The Scottish Beaver Trial that released those 11 animals in 2009 was a 5-year partnership between the Scottish Wildlife Trust, the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, and Forestry Commission Scotland, years in the planning before a single beaver ever touched Scottish water. The animals themselves were captured in Norway, where healthy, genetically robust beaver populations had survived and were quarantined and health screened before release to ensure they carried no diseases that might harm Scotland's existing wildlife. Unlike many earlier, informal reintroduction attempts that had taken place with wildlife elsewhere in the world, this project was explicitly framed as a scientific trial, complete with a rigorous, independently run monitoring program designed to track exactly what impact, if any, the beavers had on the surrounding forest and waterways. The results began appearing almost immediately, and they accelerated from there. Within the first year, the released beavers had begun constructing dams and lodges across the 3 Knapdale lochs, converting stretches of previously open water and forest edge into the kind of complex wetland habitat the region had not supported in centuries. Monitoring teams documented new pond creation, changes in water flow patterns, and, within a few years, measurable increases in the abundance and diversity of other wetland-dependent species using the newly created habitat, exactly the pattern that had been observed in beaver reintroduction projects elsewhere in Europe. Independent monitoring at Knapdale documented specific ecological changes that went well beyond simply more water. Researchers tracking invertebrate life around the beaver-created wetlands found increased numbers and diversity of dragonfly and damselfly species using the new open water and marginal vegetation the dams had created. Fish surveys found that, while beaver dams can present some localized barriers to fish movement, the deeper pools and increased habitat complexity created upstream and downstream of dams often benefited fish populations overall, providing cover and feeding habitat that a simple, undammed stream channel could not offer. Otters already present in the area before the beavers arrived were observed making regular use of the new pond systems, taking advantage of the improved fish habitat the beavers had inadvertently created for them. Almost as interesting as what was happening at the official trial site in Knapdale was what was happening entirely outside it. Around the same period, an independent, unauthorized population of beavers had established itself along the River Tay and its surrounding catchment in eastern Scotland. Animals that had either escaped from private collections or been illegally released by parties who were never officially identified. Unlike the carefully monitored, legally sanctioned Knapdale population, the Tayside beavers existed in a kind of legal gray zone for years, technically present without official permission, yet clearly here to stay. In 2015, following the conclusion of the 5-year Scottish Beaver Trial, researchers compiled their full findings into a report titled Beavers in Scotland and submitted it to the Scottish government for review. The evidence was compelling enough that in 2016, Scottish ministers announced they intended to allow both populations, the officially reintroduced Knapdale beavers and the unofficial, self-established Tayside population, to remain permanently and expand their range naturally across the country. That decision was formalized in 2019 when the Scottish Parliament passed legislation making the Eurasian beaver a legally protected species in Scotland for the first time in roughly 4 centuries. With legal protection secured, the Scottish Wildlife Trust and the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland returned to Knapdale in 2017 to reinforce the original population, whose genetic diversity, drawn from just 11 founding animals, needed strengthening for long-term viability. Over the following 3 years, an additional 21 beavers were released into the forest, both boosting overall numbers and considerably widening the population's gene pool. Meanwhile, the unofficial Tayside population, no longer facing any threat of removal, was expanding at a remarkable pace entirely on its own. A 2012 survey estimated roughly 38 to 39 beaver territories in the Tay catchment, representing around 146 individual animals. By the 2020 to 2021 survey period, that same population had grown to 251 territories, an estimated 954 beavers, a more than 6-fold increase in under a decade. Researchers tracking the population spread found beavers moving well beyond their original Tayside stronghold into the 4th catchment, parts of Fife, West Lothian, and as far as Loch Lomond and the town of Crianlarich. By 2022, a national report estimated Scotland's total wild beaver population, combining the descendants of the original Knapdale release with the far larger, self-expanded Tayside population, at approximately 424 territories, or more than 1,500 individual animals. Wildlife officials projected that if growth continued along its current trajectory, Scotland could be home to as many as 10,000 beavers by 2030, a population entirely descended, at least at Knapdale, from 11 animals released into 3 quiet lochs in 2009. That rapid expansion has not been without friction. Beaver dams and burrowing can conflict directly with agricultural land use, particularly on low-lying farmland along the Tay, where flooded fields and damaged flood defense infrastructure have created real, ongoing tension between conservation goals and working farms. Scotland's wildlife management approach to this conflict has shifted noticeably over time, In 2021, 87 beavers were killed under official government license to resolve serious agricultural conflicts, compared with just 33 that were trapped and relocated instead. By the 2024 to 2025 reporting period, that balance had reversed dramatically. Only 23 beavers were culled, while 79 were trapped and translocated, 47 of them to new sites within Scotland and 30 more to licensed projects in England and Wales. Nearly 120 beaver dams were still removed under license that same year, where they posed genuine flood risk to infrastructure, but the overall shift away from lethal control and toward relocation reflects Scotland's broader policy commitment to expanding the beaver population into new catchments rather than simply managing it downward wherever conflict arose. That expansion strategy is now formalized under Scotland's Beaver Strategy 2022 to 2045, which explicitly calls for identifying and licensing new release sites across the country to help spread the population beyond its current Tayside and Gnapdale strongholds. Licensed beaver releases have already taken place in the Trossachs, the Cairngorms National Park, and Loch Lomond, and a license to release beavers into the Bowley catchment in the Scottish Highlands was recently approved, extending the species' recovering range even further north. The dams, ponds, and wetlands this expanding population continues to build carry benefits well beyond simple habitat creation. Beaver-engineered wetlands slow the flow of water through a landscape, meaning they can help reduce peak flooding downstream during heavy rainfall, while also holding water in the landscape for longer during dry periods, a form of natural climate adaptation increasingly relevant as both flooding and drought have become more frequent and more severe across the United Kingdom in recent years. Conservation groups researching UK-wide beaver reintroductions have specifically highlighted this dual flood and drought resilience benefit as one of the strongest practical arguments for continuing to expand beaver populations into new river catchments. Gnapdale's beavers also became something the original trial planners had not fully anticipated, a genuine tourism draw. Visitors began traveling specifically to the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the animals or their dams and lodges, bringing a modest but real economic benefit to a rural part of Argyll that had few other major visitor attractions. Local operators began offering guided beaver watching walks and canoe trips along the lochs, turning a scientific reintroduction trial into an unplanned but welcome addition to the regional tourism economy, a pattern that has since repeated itself at other UK beaver reintroduction sites as well. Scotland's beaver recovery has also unfolded alongside a broader, slower-moving reintroduction effort across the rest of the United Kingdom. In England, an independent population established itself along the River Otter in Devon around the same period the Tayside beavers appeared in Scotland, and after years of monitoring under a formal trial, English beavers gained legal protection as well. In 2025, England saw its first officially sanctioned wild beaver release under a new government policy at the National Trust's Purbeck Estate in Dorset, with further releases following soon after on the Trust's Holnacote Estate in Somerset. Considered together, Scotland's Gnapdale and Tayside populations and England's more recent releases represent the same species returning to the same island nation from two largely independent starting points, 400 years after it was hunted out of existence across the entire United Kingdom. Consider for a moment the distance between where this story started and where it stands today. In the 16th century, the last beaver in Scotland was hunted out of existence, ending a presence that stretched back millennia. In 2009, 11 animals, captured in a different country and released into 3 forest lochs as part of a closely watched 5-year scientific trial, quietly began rebuilding what 400 years of absence had erased. Combined with an independent population that arrived through entirely unofficial means around the same time, those animals and their descendants have since grown into a population numbering in the thousands, spreading across river catchments throughout the country, restoring wetlands, and reshaping the physical landscape of Scotland's rivers in ways no human engineering project could replicate at anywhere near the same cost. If stories like this one about a single small reintroduction quietly reshaping an entire landscape are the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe and I will see you in the next one.